Hi, I'm Jen Taylor-Watts, and I'm one of the QI leads in the QI team. I'm going to be talking to you today about the implementation stage of QI work, how that's different from testing, and also providing some examples from ELFT, from the Tower Hamlets Violence Reduction Collaborative, which I support. This model is really taken from the Improvement Guide, Chapter 8. We have some copies of this up on the 4th floor at Alley Street with the QI team. So if you're really keen to perhaps read some of the theory around this, do come on up. You can sit by us and read for yourself this chapter if you'd like to read the detail. So many of you will have seen this slide before, which shows how we progress through our PDSA cycles. When we start, we're very much in a testing stage, and at this point we really only have sort of theories and predictions about what is going to help to improve things. We take that through testing, and we test under a variety of different conditions. But once we do that and develop a high degree of confidence that what we're doing is working, we can then move into the implementation phase. So that's when we make things part of routine operations to really ensure we hold those gains for the long term. And there's a number of steps that you can undertake as part of implementation to make sure you're doing it effectively. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So yeah, a key thing to understand in all of this really is the difference between testing and implementation. So testing is really very much when you don't know what's going to work, you're exploring things, so you're trying and you're adapting your knowledge on a small scale to learn what works in your system. Whereas implementation is once you've actually developed a high degree of belief that the tests have changed, that the things you've tried doing differently have actually worked. So you want to bed them down and make them business as usual in the day-to-day operation of your system. So a kind of quite a useful test for what stage you're at with all of this is to ask yourself, how confident are you that the changes you've made would persist if you or your other main leads on the project were away from the team for a month? If you're very confident that it would persist and that the team would crack on with it all and not have any problems, then you're probably quite far down the line of the implementation phase. If you're not very confident, then there's definitely a sign there's more work to do on this. So in the Improvement Guide, Chapter 8, there are a number of areas that are mentioned for things you have to work on to ensure your changes are bedded down for the long term. First off, they talk about standardization, which is really a method of establishing specific recognized policies and practices that can act as a model or guideline for a process. So essentially, you do this when you're doing your testing of changes, but you will come to a point where you really arrive at the way of doing things that you've thoroughly tested, and you'll be standardizing that so that it happens consistently across your team. That's step one, if you like. What follows very naturally from that is documentation. So that's essentially writing those new ways of working down, so those new procedures and processes are very clearly set out and therefore integrated into systems. So it's very important that that's done, so that any members of the team, if they become unsure, if you have new starters, they can go somewhere to read how things are now done in the team, and they can refer to that. And there's another important dimension to this documentation phase, which is really you do need a system to ensure that you keep those ways of working fresh and reflective of new knowledge. So we will always be learning, even when we're beyond the testing phase. You're going to carry on doing these new ways of working, but actually your system will continue to develop. And it is important that you have moments set out where you can reflect on has there been anything else that we've learned, or has there been any more evidence in the literature that we should be incorporating into how we're doing things? So a system for review. And that review system, it should be an active process, and you should have clear roles and responsibilities in that, also documented and set out in your information about the work. Number 3 is important as well. You do need to think about data and having a means of knowing whether the level of performance is maintained in terms of what you've changed and the improvements that you've achieved. As you know, with QI work, we look at data over time. So if it's at all possible, it's a really good idea for you to continue to look at data over time. However, that won't be possible in all projects. You may need to consider a system of periodic audit to keep an eye on things. But if it is possible to look at it over time, for example, using our quality and performance dashboards, then that's fantastic. And do think about how that data is continuously shared with teams, so your broad team keeps up to speed with the issue and your holding of your new level of performance. Area 4 starts getting into your team particularly, and this is really about education, training, other kind of workforce support processes. These are very, very important that you use them to ensure that your existing team and any new team members are kept up to date and brought up to speed on your new ways of working and how to go about that. It's also about ensuring people understand, the whys around why we do things differently, what the drivers for the work were, but otherwise particularly about the kind of any skills involved in the new ways of working. So think about supervision. Away days are fantastic opportunities, and make sure you're really thinking about the whole MDT, both current and new team members, in terms of using those support and training processes and opportunities effectively. There may be, number 5, there may be some resource implications from the new ways of working, and it is important to think about that. You just need to make sure you do have a means by which you can meet any resource needs. So, does your new way of working need a display board on the ward to keep people up to speed? Is there anything else that does need resource on an ongoing basis? And you will need, in most cases, it will be about speaking with managers and perhaps ultimately with your DMT to ensure any resource needs are met on an ongoing basis. Number 6 is a really, really big area, and it does kind of interact and interrelate with everything else on this list. The second half of Chapter 8 in the Improvement Guide really goes into this in a lot of detail. It's essentially about the human side or the social side of any changes we make. And this is really, really key to the success of projects in the testing phase, but also during implementation. This may be the point at which the work broadens from the initial project team to really be spread out and shared across the whole team. And that does involve a bit of thinking through as to how you're going to go about that effectively. You're going to need broad collective leadership for any changes you've made in your team. So there's a lot of different activities you could do under this. Things like using away days, using education and training opportunities is a big part of it, in fact. But there'll be other things as well. So it's really important to remember this human side of change. People can find it can be some of the most complex and challenging sides to improvement work, but you just need to have that hat on about how do you engage and motivate people in changes that have been made, help them to understand, why has it been done and the difference it's making, and to help them feel like they are playing an important part in leading that. So now let's look at some examples from the Tower Hamlets Violence Reduction Collaborative, which I support alongside other violence collaboratives across the Trust. So this is some examples of the standardization and documentation phase in Tower Hamlets. What we have here are the change idea sheets, which is basically where the teams have actually set out what they're doing differently from before they started the work. So they've got to the point where they've, across the whole 6 wards in Tower Hamlets, they've agreed, the standard ways in which they're using these 4 change ideas of the Brossett violence checklist, safety huddles, use of the safety cross, and safety discussions in ward community meetings. And this really sets out how to go about using these change ideas. Those are saved in ward folders, so members of the team can access them if they ever need to remind themselves about how to use these ideas. And as we've said, if you have new team members joining, there's a clear place where they can go to or they can be supported to understand the new ways of working. This actually links with an away day session we ran for Roman Ward, and this is a good example, as I mentioned, the interlinks between those steps like standardization and documentation and that human side of change and the engagement question. So actually what we did for Roman Ward was we ran a session for the broad team with the aim of really ensuring that we were that there was a broad understanding across the team, and that there was broad collective leadership by everybody as to how things are done on Roman Ward now and how they're different from before. So if I just describe this session and how it worked. First step was to share the quantitative data with the team, and for Roman Ward that shows a 72% reduction in violence from the baseline period. And then we really gave the team a bit of time to, in small groups, have a think about what are the things that you do now that you didn't do before starting this work. And this question was really aiming to elicit from them what the change ideas are that Roman Ward is now using. We brainstormed those, the team fed back those to me onto a flip chart. And then I set them the challenge of describing how to do those new change ideas and why they're valuable. So you can see here a slide that says small group work. Actually, I really wanted this to connect with something familiar for wards, and that is having, say, a new student nurse on the ward. And I asked them to set out on flip charts, the key things that they would need to include in an explanation for how to do these change ideas, what are the key steps, what's important, and how you'd explain the value and the impact of these ideas on the ward. How has it changed things? An exercise like this is really great and really powerful because it actually, as you'll see in a minute, helps to achieve this standardization and documentation, but actually specific to one team. But also it helps the teams to reflect on what they're doing and to share that with colleagues. We also, you'll see the second little slide there, the teams worked in small groups on each of the 4 ideas, and then we got them to circulate with a different coloured pen to comment on other flip charts. So they actually contributed to all of the ideas. And here's the output from this exercise, and you can see the photo there of them working away on it. Here you can see what the team came up with in terms of safety huddles. First of all, how to do them, what are the important components, and you can see the annotations in different coloured pen when the team when the other groups circulated, they added a bit more detail. And then the second sheet there, you can see the staff's reflections on the value and the impact of these ideas on Roman Ward. The follow-up to this exercise has been for the team on Roman Ward to actually now document their own versions of these change ideas based on this group work. Although at the beginning I showed you the collaborative wide versions, which were agreed across by the leads from all the wards, there are little nuances in how the different wards are using the ideas, and this exercise has really helped to distill that specifically for Roman Ward, as kind of developed, as you can hear, by the team all together. And so these documented ideas will be saved in the Roman Ward files, and they very much are how these ideas are used on that ward. And the second bit of this away day was actually something that we included to give the leads an idea as to which of the ideas are most thoroughly implemented. And this links to the question I mentioned at the beginning about if you weren't on the ward for 3 weeks to a month, to what extent are you confident these ideas would continue? And we actually asked the teams to put a little dot on these very simple scales for each of the 4 ideas, to give us an idea as to which area might need a little bit more attention, a bit more priority, to make sure everybody understands it and how to do it and why it's important. For the most part, on Roman Ward, we came out, it looks like the team are actually pretty confident in the extent to which these ideas are implemented. But, on other wards, this could be a really useful exercise to help leads understand where they might need to be spending a bit more time with teams. Some other ideas from other bits of the Tower Hamlets Violence Reduction Collaborative in terms of that question of engagement and the human side of change. Here we have Lee Ward's safety huddle champion idea, which they came up with completely themselves. It did come from feeling that the leadership of this work was a little bit too concentrated on some individuals' shoulders, and they wanted to take some proactive steps to broaden that out. So they created the Safety Huddle Champion, which is the team's vote using that little green card you see at the bottom left there. They nominate a colleague and they provide a reason for why they feel that colleague should be considered the Safety Huddle Champion that month. And each month, Clayton, the modern matron, will award a staff member based on the feedback of their colleagues, which is just a really nice thing. You need to handle this kind of thing carefully. You don't want it to become overly competitive, but it's quite a positive thing for the team on Lee Ward, and it might be worth considering for you too. And another nice thing about it is it actually also generates not just the person who won, but all the nominations, lovely little comments from colleagues that can all be put up somewhere perhaps, or shared with those staff members individually. Just helps people's motivation in the work. And also I support Tower Hamlets with a bit of tweeting. Twitter might not be everyone's cup of tea, but it can be a really nice thing to raise awareness about the work a team has done, and celebrating really the achievements of a team that's really achieved some amazing results through their QI work. Any team that's achieved their aim and seen a sustained improvement, that's a basis for celebration like this, or perhaps a poster on the ward, whatever's right for your context. And there's also been some work to support the broader team to engage and feel motivated through developing their understanding of QI, in fact. So a lot of staff from Tower Hamlets have come on the Pocket QI course. Here you've also got a little example of a staff member who was supported to use the PDSA model to just do a quick little bit of improvement on the handover process. It wasn't a full project, but they used this PDSA model just to do some quick work on it, and actually it did change things quite effectively. And this staff member was just supported by the ward manager who'd been on the ISIA with a little bit of additional coaching. And it's a really great example, I think, of how you can support staff to start, using these skills and this methodology. As we've mentioned, use of data is an important one. For Tower Hamlets Violence Collaborative, we can access the data around violent incidents on an ongoing basis. So that is printed out and put up on the ward, and this is Roman Ward's board, which will continue to look like this. It may evolve a bit, but they will continue sharing information about this on the ward. In fact, other wards have got some other very cool ideas. Lee Ward do put information about their QI work, not just the violence reduction work, but other work as well, on their television when it's not being used by service users to watch programs. There's something you can do, as I understand it, which George on Lee Ward would be the person to help you with it if you think that could work for you. But you can just get it to, it's like a screensaver, but it can pop up information about QI projects, for example, as well. And of course, posters might be the right thing for you too. So here we have a driver diagram which pulls all that together onto one page for you. So the broad aim, obviously, for the violence reduction work is that we achieve ongoing effective implementation, and that will be evidenced through holding the gains that have been achieved with the collaborative work. And if you're at this stage in your project, your aim will be something very, very similar to this, essentially that you're wanting to hold your gains as well. And as we said, in accordance with the Improvement Guide, Chapter 8, these are the areas that you need to think about in order to do that. And on the right-hand side are the tangible actions that we've come up with in terms of the violence collaborative work so far, some of which may read across and be useful to you, but you will have to think about it in relation to your own project and your own context. But this was just really to give you some ideas about how one project or big project has gone about doing this, and I hope that's been helpful to you. And here is the on our microsite, this template is available to help you to work through these implementation steps for your own project. So just simple Word template within these areas that we've run through that you can fill in for your own work. Thanks very much for your time today. Good luck with your implementation stage. And of course, do get in touch with your coach or the QI team if you need any more support at all. Thanks.